cringe as Dave Vincent.
I like his country stuff.
I meant his aesthetic, not his music.
Okay, Yes, I agree.
Like early Zack from Ghost Adventures as a cowboy, when he was still wearing all the affliction, that kind of vibe. I feel when you first hear goth country, that might be what people are thinking of. Anyway, my point being is I think the religious element has been taken up by the goth country scene. And so anyway, I was on Rate Your Music, and highly rated was Songs of Ohia. This was, I think, the top rated album on Spotify, so I just threw that one on. And I have listened to, actually I think I've listened to all their albums in a day, so that should give you an impression of how much it meant to me. I called them in the chat depressive suicidal roots rock, which is just a little joke for myself. I love throwing depressive suicidal in front of genres that don't normally have it associated with it. I often call Bread depressive suicidal soft rock.
I know you've told me they're sad songs, but it's always going to be funny to me.
We can talk about my irrational love of Bread another time. Let's finally talk about this album.
I'm curious to hear it someday, but we'll get to Songs of Ohia first.
Like, just drips melancholy. It's just so depressing. It's another album like that Purple Mountains thing where coming back to it after the fact, the singer did drink himself to death, basically. So it adds that level of reality to the pain that you're hearing in the vocals. I think the best known song is the opener, Farewell Transmission, and I do throw that one on quite a lot, but it's just hit after hit for me. I don't know if this one is quite up to the level of American Music Club or Purple Mountains as far as just inspiring pure misery in me, but I think if I would have found it when I was 14, it might be in that same position. I am really curious to hear what your take on this one was.
Given, even with you being new to the scene, a lot of what I've heard so far is stuff that you fed over to me, and so far it's been entirely knocking it out of the park. This album was no exception. I do know the one that really got me was, my phone just died so I can't look it up on there, but track 4, I want to say, it was called
Almost Was Good Enough.
That's the one. Yeah, that one in particular, it's damn, I'm really feeling this one. Something about that one really cut to the core this time. Just as a further example of the slowcore roots rock, that kind of vibe, this was just another excellent example of that. Again, same with Purple Mountains, same with all the Funeral Doom bands we talked about earlier. It hits that much harder when you realize this really came from somewhere really deep within this guy. There was no posturing, it was just, that's the life he was living. And as with anything, as with those other projects, it boils down to just the authenticity of it makes it so affecting to listen through. A couple of these albums, I don't get too emotionally involved with too many things these days, but several of the albums, this one, have put a tear in my eye at least once. And it's that kind of good pain, you just feel it. And it's hard, it's something that's hard for me to put in words myself, but this kind of music is just, it is a catharsis. What was this guy's name?
Jason Molina.
Okay. Yeah, what Jason had going on this album was just outstanding, and I definitely got to check out the rest of what he's done, because I'm sure this guy didn't just hit lightning this one time. Or, I think I just put together two different phrases to make that sentence.
But this album is not an example of lightning in a bottle. It's pretty much par for the course. I've listened to 90% of Songs of Ohia's output. I've listened to all of the subsequent follow-up project by Magnolia Electric Company, which was more in this vein. His earlier stuff is even a little bit more stripped down. This one, he brought in a full band, trying to harken back to the Southern rock ballads of the 70s, so it's a little bit more musically complex. So the Magnolia Electric Company albums are a continuation of that. And then he has some solo work, which I have not checked out yet, but I'm sure it's great.
Yeah, I can definitely see pretty much anything there is something that I'm going to have to try, just even if it's close to this quality. It's going to be a great listen. He
reminds me a lot of, and I don't know how familiar you are with either, but Will Oldham, who goes by Bonnie Prince Billy on some albums, and also Vic Chestnut. Are you familiar with either of them?
I'm not sure I've heard either of their names.
Okay. I'm going to send you a Will Oldham song. I definitely want you to hear it, because I definitely think we'll be visiting him soon. Vic Chestnut, a similar tragic music figure. I forget exactly how he passed away. I think it was suicide, but he was an early 90s critical darling. Again, there's just this authenticity to the suffering. But I do think when you're talking about these stripped down roots rock stuff, I think one of the reasons it hits so hard is just because there isn't really a whole lot to focus on but the lyrics. And I think the lyrics themselves are often very stripped down. And I think maybe one of the reasons it hits people like us so hard is because you and I are primarily, I don't really consider myself a metalhead, but metal was my first love. And I listen to a lot of heavy metal, a lot of progressive rock, and a lot of times, even if those bands can hit on similar themes, a lot of times it's really hyperbolic and dripping in like metaphor, taking a little bit more poetic license. And when you talk about stuff like Songs of Ohia or like Vic Chestnut, David Berman, any of those guys, it's like there's really no pageantry behind the lyrics. It's just complete raw emotion. I think the way I describe them to you is it's very easy to find examples in music of the misery of the artist or the poet or a sort of grand romantic figure. And I think what a lot of these bands capture is the poetry and the misery of the guy sitting at the end of the bar by himself. I think any pure statement of emotion is valid. I'm not dissing any other music we listen to or negating the experience of any of those musicians, but there is something that just really cuts the bone. I think the directness might be part of it. And I don't know, maybe if you're, what's the term, neurotypical, maybe this wouldn't hit as hard. I don't know. But as someone who has not seen a lick of serotonin since like age 4, hits home.
I guess on my own end, yeah, just being a person who has a lifelong problem expressing emotions, hearing everything laid out that plainly is just, that's something I don't feel like I could ever do to that level. And it really gives it a certain impact that a lot of the depressive metal or prog rock or anything I grew up with just wouldn't quite duplicate.
I think maybe you and I have a similar problem. I think maybe one of the reasons it's so appealing is because it's all the things that I've never been able to say. For me in particular, I have a problem. I still have to do this with my wife, is a lot of times if we're having kind of a discussion or if I'm upset about something or whatever, I claim up and I can't really talk about it. But then the next day I send her 3 pages of text message just because it's hard for me to vocalize it, because I just have this irrational fear that I've had since childhood that if I express a genuine emotion, then the men in the white suits are coming and take me away, that I've never really been able to shake. To ape my conclusion to a couple of the other albums, if the last 10 minutes of this podcast hit anything for you or pressed the right buttons, you'll like this album. All right, I guess we should wrap it up. Do you have the list for next week?
My picks, we got the legend himself from Panopticon, Its Roots to the North, fusion of black metal, bluegrass, and a bit of Gothenburg death metal riffing as well. Definite favorite of mine. We got Foals with Everything Not Saved Will Be Lost, Part 1, in the indie math rock direction. Have one of the solo albums from Carl Sanders of Nile, specifically Saurian Exorcisms, where he just fully explores his love for Egyptian music. Got a band you should never bring up in obscure prog groups. We got Porcupine Tree with Fear of a Blank Planet, and their mix of prog with kind of alt-rock metal vibes. And finally, just wanted to end things with something right to the point. We got Nazem with Helvete, a grindcore classic. What are you looking at next week?
We'll be talking about Mordor and their album Odes, which is a dark ambient dungeon synth album with a free jazz album Shiva Recoil by Phantom City, a traditional AOR album by Giant called Last of the Runaways, Bloodstar by Bloodstar, which is an industrial thrash doom from the 80s that I really want more people to hear, and a last minute substitution. I'm going to be talking about Coming Back Hard Again by the Fat Boys, which is a hip-hop record from the 80s, which most people are going to be familiar with. I was originally going to talk about a compilation by the Screwed Up Click, because I really want to talk about DJ Screw, but Prince Marky D passed away recently, and I haven't really seen anybody talk about it, which is really tragic to me because I love the Fat Boys. I think they have a reputation as being a novelty act, but I think they really are one of the best aged of the 80s hip-hop guys, because so much of that stuff, God bless it, I appreciate it for its moment in history and what it contributed to the genre, because I am a big fan of hip-hop, but a lot of it was like that rapidy rap-tastic, whereas the Fat Boys, I don't necessarily know if I'd call it fresh, but I do think it stands the cold, harsh light of the modern day a little better than a lot of their compatriots. So I think it sucks ass that another legendary musician has passed away and been immediately forgotten about. It depresses me. It happened with James Ingram, it happened with Eddie Money. These dudes to me are these idols of popular music that are so important to me, and then they die and you don't see really anybody give a shit. It's just sad. All right. So that is all for us. I still do not have the phone number pulled up. I will get that by the 3rd episode. But you can find us hopefully at all social media at Shuffle Repeat Podcast. I get those pages going, but I don't think anybody will have those domain names. We will see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Like I said, we're still trying to find our footing a little bit here, although I think you'll probably agree with me. This is definitely, I think, the vibe I want to go for. I think we've really hit the nail on the head as far as what we want to do on this one.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
So hopefully, if you're out there and you enjoyed this conversation, you'll stick with us as we polish this turd into something really good. Signing off, I am Zach.
I'm Ian.
And this is Shuffle Repeat. We'll see you next time.